tab, which is under in Brightspace here in the folder. So if you scroll down here, you have written assignments. Written assignments is where all the parts of the manuscript are. And to write the discussion, we need to go through the results first. So I have analyzed the results for you, and I've posted it to Brightspace here under written assignments. Results right here. You are to copy and paste these results word for word into your final paper. So I've written this section for you. All you have to do is copy and paste it. But let's take a look at it because that's going to help us write the discussion. Okay, so we had 5 hypotheses, and we tested 5 hypotheses, and this is what we came up with. So there was no significant correlation between empathy and mask wearing. R is 0.08, that's not significant. There was no significant difference in empathy between those individuals getting the booster vaccine and those individuals not getting the booster vaccine. So we hypothesized that there may be a difference depending on, empathy levels in terms of people getting a vaccine for COVID and people not getting the booster vaccine for COVID. And we find that there's no difference there. So empathy doesn't play a role in getting the booster shot. It didn't even play a role in getting the original vaccine when we were looking at that a couple of years ago. There was a significant positive correlation between health anxiety and fear of future pandemics. So this is the significant effect, the hypotheses that we supported, is that as health anxiety increases, so does the fear of future pandemics increase. So people that are high on health anxiety are going to be worried about things happening in the future. Are we going to have a return to COVID? Is it going to be worse than COVID? If you're worried about your health, you're worried about possibly future pandemics, and you're not mistaken to worry, because there are going to be future pandemics, but there's no use worrying about them on a regular basis. So that was supported. So far, out of the 3 hypotheses, the third one was supported, the first 2 weren't. There was no difference in anxiety or depression between those who have lost friends and family to COVID and those who have not. So, and I've analyzed both for anxiety, there was no difference, and there was no difference in depression here. So we originally hypothesized that there would be a difference. So if you lost family and friends, you'd be more anxious, you'd be more depressed. We don't see that to be the case here. But it could be that it's been like a long time since people, the first wave of COVID was years ago, almost 5 years ago. So we're not really as worried about COVID anymore, or we're not feeling the sort of short-term effect of it like we did at the beginning. And then there was no correlation between attachment anxiety and desire to have family and friends vaccinated. What we're saying is that the population at large, or the students in the sample, but in general they represent the population. People just don't care anymore, except for the future pandemics. People don't care about that. They're a little bit worried about that, but everything else, they're not caring about mask wearing, they're not caring about vaccination, and I can't say I blame people for being tired of COVID, or say, well, COVID's not that bad, it's like the flu. Yes, yes and no. It's a little bit worse than the flu. It can be very serious in some people. Even today, people have gotten very sick from COVID, even if they had it multiple times before. So it's a little bit worse than your typical flu, but the general population is not worried about it like they were years ago when it first started. They just kind of got tired of it. And we're seeing that in our sample. Here are the results. And pretty much only the one hypothesis is supported between, health anxiety and fear of future pandemics. So now we're going to, based on these results, we're going to write our discussion section. So let's take a look at what that entails. So we want writing the discussion instructions here. Click on that. So the discussion, you're going to write the word discussion, centered, non-bolded, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. It's going to be 4 paragraphs. In the first paragraph, you're going to restate your hypotheses and whether the results supported or failed to support your hypothesis. State your results in words without using statistical terms. So tell your audience what the results mean. So we have 5 hypotheses, and you remember those 5 hypotheses. Let's go back here and take a look at the introduction, because those were our 5 hypotheses, right? Here they are. Empathy will be positively correlated with mask wearing. This was not supported. So you're going to write something along the lines of the hypotheses that empathy will be positively correlated with mask wearing was not supported. Right? The hypothesis of people receiving COVID vaccines being more empathic than those not receiving the vaccine was also not supported. You don't need to put the statistics in because I already wrote that in the results section. You just need to basically go through these 5 hypotheses and tell me if the hypothesis was supported or not. That's the first paragraph. 5 hypotheses, were they supported or not supported? You don't have to tell me why, but you have to tell me whether they were or not supported. So that's pretty basic. 5 hypotheses. Don't put the statistics in. So don't put the correlations, the t-test, the p-values. You don't need all that. You just need to state each hypothesis and whether it was supported or not in a paragraph form. So that's the first paragraph. Second paragraph. How do your findings relate to past research, especially the research discussed in the introduction, where your results similar or different from previous research? So you want to talk about each hypothesis, each of the 5 hypotheses, and if it was similar to previous research. So we didn't support the hypothesis between empathy and mask wearing. What did the previous research suggest about this? Was our results similar or different? I could say our results were different from a lot of articles that showed a correlation between empathy and mask wearing. You want to cite those studies. So if you're going to refer to a study and compare our results to a previous study, you want to cite the study here. So you want to have author, year in the citation, within in the in-text citation, and you want to do this for 5 of our hypotheses, right? We have 5 hypotheses. Tell me did the results of each hypothesis either support or fail to support previous research. That's important to cite, right? But I could definitely tell you that there were studies looking at empathy and showing empathy connected to vaccination. Our current results do not support that, which is fine. We have a different sample. It's a different year. It's perfectly fine. But just state whether the hypothesis was supporting previous research or not supporting, or different from previous research, and cite the previous research here. So that's paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, if you failed to support your hypotheses, which we did many times, explain why. What were the limitations and what were the problems with internal and external validity? So there were a number of reasons why we failed to support our hypotheses. And you should think of them, but I could say one of them is a small sample. We had a total of 200, which is not a really small sample, because I combined all the data across semesters. What else? Why else would we fail to support these hypotheses? One of the other reasons is that our samples are composed of college students. Are college students different from the general population? If I were to perform this study with older adults, would older adults get a different result here? My opinion is they probably would, because college students were never really scared that much of COVID. A lot of them were still going out and not taking precautions. A lot of college students were not really afraid of COVID. Some of them were, but there were some that weren't. And now that we're removed a few years from COVID, no one's really thinking about COVID anymore. Now, if you're a senior citizen, you're going to still be afraid of COVID because it can be severe in senior citizens, especially if they have other issues, other health issues. Most college students without health concerns figure COVID is like a cold. And so they're not going to mask up. I mean, I don't see anyone masking, really. Very few people masking these days. Once in a while. People getting booster shots, not too many. Right? So I think that's one of the limitations is that, the sample is young and for the most part relatively healthy. And they're from New York City. Does that change how people follow this guidance? And there's also not really any guidance for mask wearing. And there's not really much guidance in terms of vaccination. I mean, they tell you to go get the booster shot, but they're not focused on that like they were originally with getting the vaccine. You may hear get the booster shot, but you may not. Your doctor's probably not telling you. Maybe under certain circumstances, they're telling you to get the booster shot, but they're not pushing it. There's no advertisements pushing the booster shot. There's no emails pushing the booster shot. So it's available. It's just that people haven't taken it. Is it good to take? I don't know. That's an individual, issue. Some people are pro-vaccine, other people are anti-vaccine. So there's no arguing what the right move is. If someone wants to be on the safe side and they feel like taking the booster shot, that's fine. If someone feels that they've been sick enough with COVID and they've built up natural immunity, that's also true. Both things are true. Vaccines work and people build immunity naturally. So that's kind of debatable in terms of booster shots. Are there any other limitations besides a relatively small sample, not a large sample of 200? Samples mostly New Yorkers. We don't know if that represents the whole population. We know that the impact of COVID has been dying down, so people aren't talking about it or thinking about it. Those are all limitations. In terms, I'm sure you can think of other limitations as well of the study. I mean, the study has many flaws. This wasn't meant to be like a groundbreaking study of any kind. This was meant to just look at, is there anything correlated with these decisions in the younger population? And the answer is not too many things, right? I mean, the answer is that empathy and booster shots and mask wearing and things like that, people are just kind of tired of it. So you're not really seeing the empathy leading to these behaviors because these behaviors are way down. That's not to say people aren't empathic. It's just to say that people are just tired. I'm tired of it, you're tired of it, but it's important to study because we're going to have another pandemic at some point and we may need more compliance than what we had with COVID. And as I previously mentioned, what if the next pandemic is like a super variant of smallpox? We're not inoculated to smallpox. I mean, smallpox haven't killed a person since the 1970s, I believe. But what if it's a weaponized version of smallpox that becomes the next pandemic? And maybe it escapes from a lab, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a biological warfare. How are we going to handle that? When you have a pandemic with a very high mortality rate, like smallpox. I mean, are we going to sit there and say, screw that, I'm not staying home, I'm not masking, I'm not getting vaccines, I'm not doing any of that because I'm tired of COVID, so I'm not going to do it? If the general public is just tired of, taking precautions completely, then we have a massive death toll. Millions and millions of people will die in the next pandemic. It's not going to be 1 million. It's going to be 50 million, 100 million, depending on how dangerous the virus is or whatever disease that manifests itself during the next pandemic. So it's important. In terms of internal validity is the ability to draw cause and effect conclusions. Well, we're using a survey here, so internal validity is very limited, since we can't draw cause and effect conclusions with a survey. External validity is how well these results generalize to the population, and that external validity is also low, because this sample is based on New York City undergraduates at BMCC, and those people may not represent the general population. They may not even represent New York City's population. So the ability to draw conclusions to the general population here is limited. So low internal validity and low external validity. So that's paragraph 3. Paragraph 4, what are the real-world implications of the results of the study? Well, the real-world implications, I think, are that, people have moved past the pandemic. They're still worried about a future pandemic, especially if they're high on health anxiety. People are still worried about future pandemics. But the current pandemic, I think most people are done with it. That's the real world implication. Because we're not seeing that relationship between empathy and mask wearing, or empathy and vaccination, or even, vaccination and families and friends being sick or dying. It's almost as if the general population, or at least our sample here, people just no longer care. They're just moved on, which is fine, and that's an implication. The other implication is that, vaccination and booster shots and masking and preventative measures, these behaviors are going down. And so if there was another spike of COVID, which I don't think there will be, but if there was, a lot of people would get sick. A lot of people get sick because the masking has stopped, the vaccinations have stopped, the boosters have stopped, the discourse around COVID has stopped. You don't hear anyone talking about it. It's not on the news. I may be the only one still talking about it. And I'm sick of it too. But I know how important it is, not just for COVID, but for the future, that we figure this out. Like, how do we stop people from being, kind of laissez-faire with regard to the pandemic? This was a very important question when the pandemic started. But after a year or so, people just kind of got tired of it. And now they're just, they don't want to listen to people telling them to get vaccinations and to mask up or to be careful. Like, people are just, they're like, oh, it's over. It's not a pandemic anymore. Yeah, it's not a pandemic anymore, but people are getting very sick. I mean, people in my own family just got COVID again. And they've gotten very, very sick. They were sick for 2 or 3 weeks where they just had high fevers on and off. And they felt horribly. So it's not like it's not there. It's still there. Is it as dangerous as it was? No. But it's still there. So there are real-world implications of the study. And most of the implications are that people have sort of tuned out COVID. If there's other implications you think about, feel free to write them. My sort of analysis is that it's just people don't care anymore. Yeah, they don't want COVID, but they're not willing to do all these things to prevent it. Because it's just, they're done with it. It's not worth taking a trip to get vaccinated again. Or maybe they're anti-vaccine. But I would say that the majority of the public did get the vaccine and did get the first 2 dosages. And a lot of people got the first booster. It's just been the subsequent boosters that have just sort of dropped off greatly. People have just moved past it. How would you address the limitations in this study if you were conducting future research? So there were plenty of limitations. the sample is a problem. Maybe the survey as a whole is a problem. Maybe you don't think the survey is effective. There are better ways to do this kind of study. So if there are, talk about them and how you would fix them. How would you fix the problems in the study? Would you get a better sample? Would you get a more representative sample? Would you change anything in the survey? Would you measure something differently? Is empathy something to look at or not? Are there other variables that we didn't measure that you would measure that you think could play a role in sort of these decisions? So I'm giving you structure here. So I want 4 paragraphs set up, and I'm giving you the structure. But if you want to sort of discuss something within these 4 paragraphs, if you want to add to the conversation or add to sort of your analysis of the situation, that's fine. You could do that. I'm just giving you sort of the nuts and bolts of my opinion on sort of where I see the pitfalls of the study. But as long as it's not, something really out there, right? As long as it's grounded, the ideas that you have, I mean, you feel free. If you have more limitations, talk about them. If you have better ways to improve the study, talk about it. It was not meant to be sort of the gold standard of research. It was meant to just sort of be a pilot study. And I collected data over several years now. And I was looking for the empathy connection, and I didn't find it. But like I said, it's probably because of the people are just tired of the pandemic. People high in empathy and low in empathy, you feel bad about people getting sick if you're high in empathy. You know what it's like to be sick. You put yourself in their perspective. But it's not strong enough to motivate you to go about your life in a very precautionary way because we're tired of it. We kind of want our freedom. We don't want to be told what to do. So there's lots of room for adding on here, but make sure this is 4 paragraphs. Make sure discussions at the top. The paragraphs could be in medium to large, doesn't matter. But set it up the way I instructed you to set it up. And then you're going to upload it as a PDF file. So let's go back here, written assignments. You'll have a place to upload it here, discussion right here, where you're going to upload it as a PDF file. So you'll just upload it here, and I'll have a grade here, and I'll be ready to take a look at it and give you feedback, and then you'll make the changes for the final paper. So that's it for now. Hopefully the video helps you write the discussion section. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or stop by my office hours, which are on Fridays, Friday afternoon on Zoom. So hope all is well, and I'll see you next time for the title, the abstract, and the reference section. Bye for now.